Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why you can't stop procrastinating? Well, this new study might have a clue. Today we're diving into how our brains decide if objects look alike. And it turns out it is not just about their shape. What if the way something moves, or even the sound it makes, changes how we see its shape? That is the big question this research tackles. We tend to group things together based on how similar they look, right? Think of all the different chairs you've seen. They all fall into the chair category because they share certain shape features. But the world is full of ways to describe things beyond just their shape. They can move, they can make sounds. They can feel a certain way. So, how does our brain handle all this information when it tries to figure out if two objects are similar? Do all these different features get mashed together, or does one feature, like shape, totally dominate? This study explores just that. They wanted to see if an object's movement, or its sound, could change how similar its shape appears to be compared to other shapes. They did a couple of clever experiments to find out. First, they created a bunch of brand new made-up object shapes. You can see what they look like in this graphic. They arranged these shapes in a kind of shape space so they could systematically vary how similar or different the shapes were. Then they animated these shapes. They had three conditions for how the objects moved. One was static, meaning the object didn't move at all. This was like a baseline. Just looking at the shape, then they had a consistent motion condition, where, for example, two objects would both swing in the same way. And finally, an inconsistent motion condition, where one object might swing and the other might jump. So, participants looked at pairs of these objects. They were asked to rate how similar the shapes were on a scale from very dissimilar to very similar. And crucially, they were told to only focus on the shape. Here is where it gets interesting. If an object's movement is helping it to be recognized or categorized, then maybe consistent movement could make two shapes seem more similar. Even if they're a little different, an inconsistent motion might make them seem less similar. And guess what? They found that consistent motion did indeed make object shapes seem more similar. When two objects moved in the same way, people rated their shapes as more similar. This was true even if the shapes themselves were slightly different. But here is a really key finding. The sound the objects made didn't seem to matter at all. So for the next experiment, they decided to test that sound idea more directly. They brought back the moving and static objects, but this time they added corresponding sounds. So, if an object was swinging, it might make a swinging sound as well. They wanted to see if adding sound, which was perfectly matched to the motion, would boost the effect of motion on perceived shape similarity. And the results were pretty clear. Even with the sounds that perfectly matched the motion, it was still the motion itself, not the sound, that influenced how similar the shapes seemed. The consistent motion made shapes feel more alike, but the sound didn't add any extra punch. This suggests that the way an object moves is somehow being integrated with our understanding of its shape, in a way that sound just isn't. It is like the visual movement is becoming part of the object's identity, affecting how we compare it to other objects. But the researchers wanted to get even more specific. Are shape and motion truly fused together, or are they processed separately? They used something called the Garner interference task for this. It is a bit like a sophisticated reaction time game. The idea is that if two features are integrated, meaning they're really a combined package, then messing with one will mess with your ability to process the other. In this experiment, participants had to decide if two objects matched either in shape or in motion. They had different conditions. Sometimes one feature was kept the same while the other varied baseline. Sometimes both varied randomly filtering. And sometimes they varied together in a predictable way correlation. What they found was pretty fascinating. When people had to judge the motion, their reaction times were faster if the shapes they were looking at were consistent with that motion. This is called a redundancy gain, suggesting that the shape information was helping them judge the motion. However, when people had to judge the shape, the motion didn't seem to make much difference. It didn't speed them up or slow them down significantly. This points towards an asymmetry. Motion seems to be able to influence our perception of shape, and perhaps even how quickly we judge motion itself if the shape is right. But our perception of shape doesn't seem to be as easily swayed by motion in this task. So, pulling it all together, what is the big takeaway from this research? It seems that the way an object moves really does change how similar we perceive its shape to be. Consistent motion makes shapes feel more familiar and similar, while inconsistent motion can make them feel more distinct. But the sound the object makes, even if it perfectly matches the motion, doesn't seem to play a big role in this shape similarity judgment. This suggests that our brains are really good at integrating visual motion with shape to form a cohesive understanding of an object. Think about it. If a ball is rolling, we expect it to behave in a certain way. If it suddenly starts hopping, that unexpected motion tells us something is different. This research shows that even when we're just asked to judge shapes, that underlying expectation based on motion can influence our perception. Now, it is important to remember that this study used very specific novel object shapes. And in experiment 2, when shape was the thing they were judging, the results were very fast and accurate, meaning the participants might have had a ceiling effect, where they were already performing so well that there wasn't much room for motion to influence their judgments. So, maybe under different circumstances, with less clear shapes or more challenging tasks, motion could have a bigger impact on shape judgments. But overall, this is a really cool insight into how our senses work together, or sometimes how they don't. It shows that our perception of objects isn't just a static snapshot, it is a dynamic process influenced by how things move in the world. It really highlights how our brains are constantly building a rich understanding of objects. And while shape is important, it is not the only story. Motion, it seems, is a crucial part of that narrative, while sound might be more of a background character in this particular scene. So, what does this mean for you and me? It might explain why objects that move in familiar ways feel more predictable and perhaps even more normal. It could have implications for how we design interfaces, how we train artificial intelligence to recognize objects, and even how we understand learning itself. If motion is so integral to shape perception, maybe we should be incorporating more dynamic elements when we teach new concepts. What are your thoughts on this? Does it surprise you that motion matters but sound doesn't? At least in this context. Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the mind, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science stories. We'll see you next time.